Welcome back to Lessons from the Front into the beautiful town of Breda here in the Netherlands. Behind me is a Spanish gate built in 1620, and behind that is the castle of Breda.
In March 1590, the Dutch Revolt had been raging for more than 20 years, as the Dutch provinces fought to break free from Habsburg and Spanish rule. At the center of the struggle stood the strategically important city of Breda, whose formidable castle was held by a Spanish garrison. The Dutch commander was Prince Maurice of Nassau, the supreme commander of the forces of the Dutch Republic and one of the great military innovators of his age. Maurice knew that a direct assault on Breda would be costly, so instead he turned to deception. The plan was wonderfully audacious. A local boatman, Adrian van Bergen, regularly delivered peat, the fuel used to heat the castle, and because his boat was familiar to the guards, he was rarely searched. Maurice's plan was to hide a small force of soldiers beneath the peat and smuggle them directly into the castle. The assault was originally planned for 2 days earlier, but disaster seemed to strike before the operation even began. The boat's skipper overslept and missed the rendezvous. The attackers had no choice but to delay. Remarkably, that apparent failure may have worked entirely in their favor. Maurice had already created a diversion, spreading the impression that the Dutch intended to attack the nearby city of Geertruidenberg. As a result, around 600 troops were sent away from Breda to reinforce its defense, leaving the castle itself with only a small number of men. And when the Peat boat finally arrived, it was during the celebrations of the carnival feast. Many of the remaining guards, mostly Italians, were reportedly drunk and unsuspecting. Hidden beneath the Peat were around 70 Dutch soldiers, led by Captain Charles de Heraugiere. While Maurice was the supreme commander and waited with the main Dutch forces outside the city, it was Charles who would actually lead this extraordinary assault from within. As the boat entered Breda, the guards allowed it through without properly searching its cargo. Once safely inside, Charles and his men emerged from beneath the peat and launched their surprise attack. The defenders were caught completely off guard, and the Dutch quickly seized control of the castle. Maurice's main army then moved in, and Breda surrendered. It was a victory achieved not through overwhelming force, but through secrecy, deception, and courage, and a remarkable amount of good fortune. A real-life Trojan horse. And that is the action we are creating today. Our host, Anton, will take command of the Spanish defenders inside Breda Castle, while my son Matthew and I would take the roles of the Dutch attackers, attempting to repeat Charles's extraordinary feat and capture this magnificent replica of Breda Castle from within.
Matthew and I launched our attack in the dead of night. The Spanish had sentries patrolling the canals within the castle, their movement determined randomly by the roll of a dice. Our objective was simple: reach the main courtyard and, in doing so, capture the castle. The further we could get without being detected, the better our chances. If a sentry was facing our direction while one of our units was caught in the light of a street lamp, the entire garrison would be alerted. So, initially, we tried to move forward quietly, keeping to the shadows. It soon became obvious, however, that our force was simply too large to remain hidden. So we decided to throw caution to the wind, silence the nearest sentry, and use our faster troops to race to the gatehouse. If the defenders reached it first, this narrow entrance could become a deadly choke point. Unfortunately, our attempt to silence the sentry failed. He raised the alarm, and the Spanish and Italian defenders began to wake up from their drunken slumbers. Matthew and I now had to move quickly. We raced along the canal towards the gatehouse, but Anton reacted just as quickly. Before we reached the gatehouse, one of Anton's squad stumbled from their barracks, still in a stupor, and found themselves face to face with the advancing Dutch in front of the gatehouse. A brief firefight erupted, and with our troops pouring along the canal and greatly outnumbering the defenders, the Spanish squad was quickly overwhelmed and annihilated. With the immediate threat dealt with, Matthew and I paused at the gatehouse to allow our slower teams to catch up. Anton, in the meanwhile, managed to get a squad into the courtyard beyond the gatehouse, taking up a position behind the low wall of a covered walkway. That meant we faced a serious problem. We would have to funnel our troops through a narrow entrance while the guards waited on the other side. If we weren't careful, they could destroy our units one at a time as they emerged. What are we going to do?
Okay, so he has a unit of commanded shots watching the doorway. So we don't want to send our units one at a time through it. So we're going to try and mass on the other side of the doorway and then breach altogether, or at least try to. Yeah.
Good idea. Whilst Matthew's plan was a good one, unfortunately the dice had other ideas. We had patiently waited for the slower teams to catch up and then committed our first unit into the attack. It charged through under the gatehouse and straight into the defenders exactly as Matthew had planned. The problem was that the supporting Dutch team then failed their activation rolls. Instead of following the first unit into the courtyard, they decided they needed to catch their breath. Our brave first team had therefore sacrificed itself for almost no gain. Isolated and surrounded, it was promptly decimated by the Italian and Spanish defenders, who had now certainly sobered up. Realizing the danger, the castle commander ordered a fourth defending team, made up of pikemen, to make its way from the castle to the gatehouse, where its long weapons would add a formidable defensive position. Despite the disastrous start, Matthew and I kept pushing troops through the gate. Slowly the numbers began to tell. The Dutch gained a foothold in the courtyard and then began to gain the upper hand. With the defenders gradually outnumbered, the Dutch rushed them from several directions, and what followed was a series of brutal melees. When the fighting finally subsided, the Dutch had prevailed. Only one team of Spanish pikemen remained, that team coming from the castle. With the rest of the attackers now picking off that Spanish team from range, the Spanish commander finally decided he had no choice but to surrender the castle. History had been repeated. Just as Charles and his men had done in 1590, the Dutch had seized Breda's castle from within, opening the way for Prince Maurice and his army to enter the city and secure one of the greatest victories of the Dutch Revolt. For Matthew and me, this was truly a memorable game, made even more special by the fact that we were able to play it here in Breda on this incredible recreation of the castle itself. A huge thank you to Anton and Marcel for hosting us and putting together such a fantastic game, and especially to Anton for taking the time to show Matthew and me around Breda and bringing the history of this remarkable event to life. And congratulations to Anton and Patrick Diedrichs for building this beautiful replica of the Breda Castle. And a special mention to Jan Willem, who scratch-built the Peat boat that played such an important role in recreating the original 1590 operation. The amount of work that has gone into bringing this piece of history to the tabletop is truly remarkable. If you've enjoyed this battle report, please give the video a like and consider subscribing to Lessons from the Front. It really helps the channel and it means you'll be joining us for the next battle. So until next time, folks, happy gaming!